Hey everybody, welcome to Baseballisms. My name is Joe, and this is part 3 of the great Baseballapalooza 1987 trip that I took with my buddy Frank Pazanis. And so we've stopped at Yankee Stadium in New York City, we've stopped in Philadelphia at Veterans, and one of the sort of unfortunate things about this trip is it was during the time before all of the great new ballparks were built. So going to Philadelphia, Cincinnati is our next leg of the trip, and ultimately we end up in Pittsburgh. Each of those 3 stadiums are rather similar in nature. They're the multi-purpose AstroTurf parks. In fact, I even kind of remember sitting in Philadelphia and realizing that the seats were actually angled a little bit wrong for a baseball game. It was more suited for the football stadium there. But anyway, we got up the next morning in Philadelphia and got on the road for what was our longest leg of the trip in the car. And my buddy Frank actually had a good night the night before, and so it turned out that I actually drove the entire way from Philadelphia to Cincinnati while he was reclined in the seat, snoozing basically the whole time, eating McDonald's hamburgers and crumpling up the wrappers on the floor in the front of the car, my car by the way. But we ended up pulling into Cincinnati, and we were going to meet up there with a guy that Frank had worked with. His name is Don, and he actually worked for the concessions company at Riverfront Stadium in Cincinnati, and so he was able to get us some good access to getting in there. So we ended up going in. It was the Reds and the Astros playing that night, and our good fortune happened to be that they had a rain delay going on in Cincy. Game had started, but then it was delayed a bit. So up on the big board in Cincinnati, they showed us Red Sox fans highlights of the 1975 World Series, which the Reds beat the Red Sox, as you all know. So as we're sitting there and having some beers and watching Red Sox highlights and ultimately the end of the ball game, things got to be a little bit more fun. We had to wait around for Don to get off of work that night and what he was doing with the concessions group. So they kind of just let us wander around the stadium there, and being the good inquisitive guys that we were, ended up finding a little elevator that went somewhere behind home plate that we promptly hopped on and ended up in the press box. So we walked into the press box and took a look around. There wasn't anybody there that was going to stop us, and as Frank and I fondly remember, there was cake. So Frank and I just sat down in the press box and had ourselves some cake after a whole night of drinking beer and eating hot dogs. So after we got our fill of cake, we were to rendezvous with Don down by the exit where the players' entrance and exit was in Cincinnati, so that he could take us to his house and have us crash there for the night. And while we were waiting around down there, vivid in my recollection is a white Porsche zipping on through the parking lot and pulling out into traffic, and sitting behind the wheel of that white Porsche was one Pete Rose. Charlie Hustle gave us a little wave as he pulled on out and was on his way. So that was our Cincinnati trip. We are on our way now to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Hit it hard somewhere.